Beloved, there are seasons in life when heaven seems to go quiet. You pray, but all you hear is silence. You worship, but there's no response. You fast, you cry, you wait, and still nothing moves. And it's in that silence that the enemy whispers, God's forgotten you. It's in that silence that your faith starts to tremble, your hope starts to waver, and your heart starts to question, Lord, where are you? But I came to tell somebody today, just because God is silent doesn't mean he's still. Oh, you don't hear me yet, I said. He may be quiet, but he's not absent. He may not be speaking, but he's strategizing. He may not be answering, but he's arranging. See, the silence is not the absence of activity. It's the workshop of destiny. While you're waiting, God is working. While you're crying, God is constructing. While you're wondering, God is weaving together something you couldn't even imagine. So don't curse your quiet season. Cherish it. Because this is the season of silence, when God seems quiet, but he's still working. There comes a moment in every believer's life when the noise fades, the doors close, and heaven seems to whisper nothing back. You lift your hands in prayer, and it feels as if your words are ricocheting off the ceiling. You read your Bible, but the verses that once set your soul on fire now seem like ink on a page. You look for signs, for movement, for a flicker of divine attention. And all you get is stillness. And if we're honest, that stillness can feel like abandonment. But child of God, I want you to understand something deep and powerful today. The silence of God is not the absence of God. His quiet is not his departure. His silence is his strategy. He is preparing you for something greater than you can perceive in this present moment. When a teacher gives a test, the classroom is silent. The teacher isn't absent. They're watching to see what the student will do with what they've already been taught. God's silence often comes after he has given us instructions, after he has deposited his word into our spirit. Then he steps back, not to leave us, but to see whether we can walk by faith when we can no longer hear by sound. That silence becomes the incubator of spiritual maturity. It's in that space between what he said and what he's about to do that our character is stretched, our trust is tested, and our dependence on him becomes purified. You see, preparation always takes place in private. When God was forming the world, it was void and dark. When he was forming man, it was in the dust and hidden places. When he was forming David, it was out in the fields with sheep, away from the spotlight. And when he was forming Jesus for ministry, it was in the quiet of Nazareth and the solitude of the wilderness. God does his best work where no one is watching. The silence is his workshop. The stillness is his construction site. And if you find yourself in that quiet place today, don't panic. He's not punishing you, he's preparing you. Sometimes we mistake divine preparation for divine rejection. We cry out, Lord, why aren't you speaking? Why aren't you moving? But what if God is moving in ways you can't see yet? What if the silence is the sound of him rearranging things on your behalf? When a seed is planted, it must be buried beneath the soil where it's dark and quiet. The seed doesn't complain about the darkness. It trusts the process. It knows that what looks like burial is really planting. What looks like death is the beginning of growth. That's what your silent season is. It's your seed time. You've been planted, not buried. You've been hidden, not forgotten. In the silence, God refines your motives. He strips away your dependence on external validation. When the applause fades and no one is cheering, you discover whether your faith is built on feelings or on truth. God's silence forces you to go deeper. It teaches you to listen with your spirit instead of your ears. Because sometimes, when God is not saying anything, He's doing something. And when He's not speaking to you, He's speaking for you. Moving pieces, shifting circumstances, and aligning your destiny behind the curtain of time. Think of Joseph. He had a dream of greatness, but before he ever sat on the throne, he sat in a pit and a prison. Those were silent seasons. Heaven didn't send an angel every day to reassure him. God didn't send visions every night to remind him of the promise. But while Joseph was in prison, God was preparing a Pharaoh. While Joseph was forgotten by men, God was setting the stage for his unveiling. That's how divine preparation works. It often looks like silence, but it's sacred setup. When God seems quiet, it's because He's trusting you with quiet. Not everyone can handle silence. Some people panic when heaven doesn't speak. They rush into decisions. They force outcomes. They move ahead of God. But silence is the training ground for spiritual discipline. It teaches you patience, discernment, and obedience. It teaches you that faith is not a feeling, it's a decision. You learn to trust that God's hand is at work even when His voice is not heard. You begin to realize that He doesn't need to announce every move. Sometimes He just moves. There's also a cleansing that happens in the quiet. When you can't hear God, you start to hear yourself. Your fears, your doubts, your hidden motives. And it's in that confrontation that transformation begins. You learn to surrender not only your plans, but your need for control. You begin to rest in the truth that God's timing is perfect, even when it's hidden. The silence becomes a holy space where your faith matures from something that needs signs to something that simply believes. And let me tell you, when God breaks that silence, it will make sense. Every unanswered prayer, every sleepless night, every season of stillness will suddenly connect. You'll realize He wasn't ignoring you. He was insulating you. He was preparing the stage, aligning the resources, maturing your character, so you could carry the blessing without collapsing under its weight. The silence wasn't a punishment, it was protection. Preparation requires privacy. Before a diamond shines, it's cut in secret. Before a masterpiece is unveiled, the artist spends hours in quiet creation. Before the orchestra performs, there's a hush, a stillness, because something beautiful is about to begin. That's where you are. You are in the hush before heaven's symphony. You are in the silence before the unveiling. So don't rush it. Don't despise it. Sit in the silence and let God finish what He started. Because when He finally speaks again, when He finally moves again, you'll see why He had to keep you still. He was not silent because He stopped caring. He was silent because He was still creating. And when that preparation season gives birth to revelation, you'll look back and say, if He had spoken too soon, I wouldn't have been ready. Silence is not absence, it's preparation. It's the sacred pause between the promise and the performance, the quiet heartbeat of heaven working behind the veil. So hold your peace, stay faithful, and trust the process. Because even when God seems quiet, He's still composing the next chapter of your story. And when it's time, He'll make all the noise in the world to reveal what He's been preparing all along. So often, we want God to move where we can see Him. We want open doors, clear signs, and public evidence that heaven is on our side. We want to trace His fingerprints on every event, every outcome, every step. But the truth of God's working is not always found in the visible. Most of the time, God does His best, most brilliant, most breathtaking work behind the scenes, where human eyes cannot see, where human hands cannot interfere, and where human understanding cannot comprehend. He is a behind-the-curtain God, a master director orchestrating your destiny from the shadows of eternity. When you go to a theater, the audience only sees the stage, the performance, and the actors. But before those lights ever shine, there's a team working behind that curtain. There are set designers, lighting technicians, and stage managers arranging every detail so that when the curtain rises, everything flows perfectly. The audience never sees their work, but without them, there would be no show. That's how God operates. You may not see Him moving, but He's positioning, adjusting, and arranging the details of your life so that when the curtain finally lifts, His glory is revealed through the masterpiece He has been constructing in secret. Some of the most powerful moves of God in Scripture happened behind the curtain of visibility. When the Israelites were trapped at the Red Sea, all they saw was water in front and an army behind. They couldn't see that God was already working with the wind all night long, parting the waters before Moses ever raised his staff. They didn't see the invisible hand that was preparing their way through the impossible. By the time morning came, what was once a barrier became a bridge. God had been working behind the curtain the entire time. When Esther was brought into the palace, she didn't realize that her beauty and grace were not just for royalty. They were for rescue. God was positioning her behind the scenes. Long before Haman plotted his wicked plan, she was being placed in proximity to purpose while others saw nothing special. God used the unseen details, her favor, her placement, her timing, to save a nation. That's how divine strategy works. It's not always loud. It's not always obvious. But it's always intentional. We live in a world that celebrates what is seen. We measure success by visibility. How much we can show, how many people can notice, how quickly we can announce it. But God's kingdom doesn't operate by that standard. He is not concerned about public perception. He's committed to eternal preparation. When He hides His hand, He's still moving His plan. Sometimes, the reason God doesn't show you everything is because you're not ready to handle the weight of what He's building. If He revealed too soon, you'd rush ahead of His timing. If He exposed every detail, you'd try to control what He's trying to construct. So instead, He hides the process to protect the promise. Behind the curtain, God arranges divine connections you don't even know exist. He is speaking your name in rooms you've never entered. He's preparing opportunities that haven't reached your calendar yet. He's touching the hearts of people you've never met, so that when the moment is right, everything aligns perfectly. You think you're waiting, but heaven is working. You think nothing's happening, but heaven is setting the stage. Think of Ruth gleaning in the fields. She had no idea that, while she was picking up leftover grain, God was preparing Boaz to notice her. To Ruth, it was an ordinary day of labor. To God, it was the prelude to a lineage that would produce King David and eventually Jesus Christ. That's what it means for God to work behind the curtain. You think it's a coincidence. He knows it's choreography. Even in your pain, God is backstage, turning sorrow into strength. Joseph's brothers thought they were destroying him when they sold him into slavery, but they were unknowingly delivering him into destiny. Every betrayal, every disappointment, every detour was part of the set God was building. By the time the curtain lifted, Joseph stood before Pharaoh, and what once looked like tragedy was revealed as triumph. What they meant for evil, God had already turned for good. Quietly, invisibly, intentionally. Sometimes God conceals his work so that no one else can take credit for it. He moves in ways that confuse your enemies and humble your pride. He lets you walk through seasons where nothing seems to be changing, just so when the breakthrough comes, you'll know beyond a doubt that it was him and him alone. Behind the curtain, he silences every other voice so his can speak the loudest when it's time to reveal. There's also something sacred about secrecy in the Spirit. Hidden seasons are where God refines your heart. It's behind the curtain that he purifies your motives, checks your obedience, and prepares your hands to handle what's next. When nobody is clapping and no doors are opening, you discover whether you still trust him or only trust the spotlight. The hidden place is holy ground. It's where the roots grow deep enough to sustain the fruit that will one day be seen. God is a master at working through what looks like delay or denial. Remember, before Jesus performed his first miracle, there were 30 silent years of obscurity. No platform, no recognition, no crowds. Just faithfulness in the unseen, helping in a carpenter's shop, learning obedience, growing in wisdom and stature. God was shaping the vessel behind the curtain so that when the time came, the vessel could handle the power of public ministry. If Jesus himself had to endure a hidden season, so will we. Don't despise what you don't see. Just because it's hidden doesn't mean it's not happening. Behind every answered prayer is a process. Behind every open door is a divine setup. Behind every breakthrough is a long season of unseen obedience. The reason some blessings take time is because God is not only preparing the blessing for you, he's preparing you for the blessing. And he's doing it where no one can watch, where no one can interfere, and where no one can take his glory. So if it feels like heaven has gone silent, remember the curtain hasn't opened yet. You're still in rehearsal. God is still arranging the scene, setting the lights, and aligning the timing. When the moment is right, he'll draw the curtain back, and everything you've endured, everything you've prayed for, everything you couldn't understand will stand revealed in divine order. And when that happens, you'll realize that what felt like waiting was really working. That what looked like delay was divine design. God works best behind the curtain. It's where he turns chaos into creation, confusion into clarity, and waiting into wonder. It's where he molds ordinary lives into extraordinary testimonies. So trust him when you can't trace him. Praise him even when you can't perceive him. Because the curtain will rise, And when it does, you'll see that every silent moment was a sacred move of God preparing you for the stage of purpose He built just for you. We love the light. We love clarity, understanding, and revelation. We love it when everything makes sense, when the answers are clear, when God's plan unfolds in front of us like a well-lit path. But the truth is, faith doesn't grow in the light. Faith grows in the dark, in the unseen, in the uncertain, in the moments when we can't feel, can't hear, and can't see what God is doing. It's easy to believe when everything is working. It's easy to trust when the blessings are visible and the doors are swinging open. But real faith, the kind that anchors your soul and carries you through storms, is forged in darkness. The darkness of faith is not punishment, it's process. It's the soil in which trust takes root. When God allows you to walk through seasons where you can't trace His hand, it's because He's teaching you to trust His heart. If everything was always clear, you'd never need faith. Faith begins where human understanding ends. Faith grows when sight fails. Faith deepens when logic can't explain what God is doing. Abraham learned this truth when God told him to leave his home and go to a land I will show you. Notice the language. I will show you. Not, I'll show you first. Not, here's the map. But I will show you as you go. Faith requires movement in the dark. God doesn't always give the full picture because He wants you to trust His presence more than His plan. Abraham didn't know the destination, but he knew the voice. And that's what real faith is. Walking with confidence in a God whose next step you cannot yet see. There's something sacred about the darkness. It strips you of dependency on your senses and forces you to rely solely on your spirit. When your eyes can't find evidence, your heart learns to find assurance. When your ears can't hear direction, your soul learns to discern His whisper. The darkness becomes a classroom of trust, where God teaches you how to walk without fear. It's in that unseen space that your roots of faith dig deeper than ever before. Think about a seed. Before it becomes a tree, before it bears fruit, it must first go into the ground. And the moment it's buried, it's surrounded by darkness. No light, no visibility, just pressure, soil, and stillness. Yet that's exactly where growth begins. The darkness that looks like burial is actually the beginning of life. The seed must break open in the dark before it can rise in the light. And so must we. The breaking doesn't mean you're dying. It means you're growing. Faith is not proven in sunshine. It's proven in shadows. When the bank account is low, when the diagnosis is uncertain, when the relationship falls apart, when the prayers seem unanswered, that's where faith either dies or deepens. That's when you decide whether God is good only when things are good, or if He's still God when things are dark. True faith says, even if I can't see the outcome, I still trust the one who holds it. Job understood this. He said, though He slay me, yet will I trust Him. That's not surface faith. That's forged in the dark faith. Job lost everything he loved, everything he worked for, everything that made sense, and still he held on to his trust in God. Why? Because somewhere in the darkness, Job realized that faith doesn't depend on circumstances, it depends on character. The character of God. And God's character never changes, even when your conditions do. Sometimes God will intentionally withhold light, so that you can develop inner sight. The eyes of faith see differently. They see promise in pain. They see destiny in delay. They see God's hand in what looks like chaos. Faith in the dark is not blind optimism. It's spiritual vision. It's the quiet conviction that even when life feels out of control, God is still in command. It's the steady whisper that says, "He hasn't left me, He's leading me." The truth is, God often hides growth in darkness because darkness protects what light would expose too early. When a child is conceived, it grows in the darkness of the womb. The darkness is not danger, it's design. It's where formation happens. If the light came too soon, the child couldn't survive. In the same way, there are things God is developing in you that need the cover of darkness. He hides you, not to harm you, but to help you become what you're meant to be. You might not feel it, but something is happening in your spirit. You're being stretched. Your prayers are maturing. Your dependence on God is deepening. Every unanswered question is watering your faith. Every silent night is strengthening your roots. When you finally step into the light, you'll realize that what looked like loss was actually preparation. What felt like emptiness was the deep work of faith being formed in you. Faith must grow in the dark, because it's only in darkness that trust becomes real. It's easy to shout hallelujah when everything is bright, but it's another thing to whisper, "Thank you," in the dark. It's easy to praise when the answer arrives, but it's holy to praise when there's no sign of change. That's mature faith. The kind that doesn't need proof to believe. The kind that doesn't need evidence to obey. When you're in a dark place, don't mistake God's silence for His absence. Just because you can't see the light doesn't mean it's gone. It's just hidden until the right time. Every night eventually turns to morning. Every storm eventually clears. Every seed that stays faithful in the soil eventually breaks through the surface. The key is to stay planted, to keep believing, keep praying, keep trusting, even when the darkness lingers. And when the light finally returns, and it will, you'll see that your faith didn't just survive the darkness. It grew because of it. You'll realize you're not the same person who entered that season. You're stronger, wiser, deeper, and more anchored. You've learned that faith isn't about what you see, it's about who you know. You've learned that sometimes God doesn't remove the darkness. He just gives you enough light to take the next step. Faith must grow in the dark. It's where the unseen becomes believable, where the impossible becomes inevitable, and where your trust is transformed into testimony. So don't curse the darkness. Don't run from it. Let it do its work. Because in that quiet, hidden place where nothing seems to be happening, your faith is being stretched, strengthened, and shaped into something unshakable. And when the light finally breaks through, you'll understand that it was the darkness that made your faith shine. In a world that glorifies motion, stillness feels unnatural. We live in a culture that tells us to hustle harder, to keep pushing, to never stop moving. If we're not busy, we feel behind. If things slow down, we assume something's wrong. But in God's kingdom, stillness is not stagnation, it's strategy. When heaven grows quiet and movement ceases, it doesn't mean God has paused His plan. It means He's perfecting it. What looks like inactivity is often divine intentionality. God uses stillness to set things in order, to align what you cannot see, and to prepare you for what you're not yet ready to handle. Stillness is the place where clarity is born. You can't hear whispers in a storm. You can't discern divine direction in constant noise. God will often quiet your life before He reveals your next move. When everything slows down, when doors stop opening, when you feel like your prayers hit a wall, that's not punishment. That's positioning. God silences distractions so you can hear Him more clearly. The greatest revelations rarely come in chaos. They come in quiet. Think about it. Before the Red Sea parted, there was a moment of stillness. Moses stood between an army and an ocean, and God told him, "Be still and see the salvation of the Lord." Notice, God didn't say, "Run." He didn't say, "Fight." He said, "Be still." Because sometimes the most powerful move you can make is not movement at all. It's trust. Stillness requires faith that God is fighting battles you can't see. While Israel stood still, God sent a wind to divide the waters. Stillness released the strategy. Stillness is not the absence of movement. It's the presence of alignment. When an archer pulls back a bow, everything freezes for a moment. That pause, that tension, that quiet instant before release, it's strategic. The archer isn't doing nothing. He's focusing. He's steadying his aim, aligning his target. The stillness before the release is what gives the arrow its power. And that's what God is doing in your life. He's pulling you back, holding you steady, aligning your spirit, so when the time comes, your release will hit the mark. The pause is not punishment, it's precision. Elijah discovered the strategy in stillness when he was running from Jezebel. He was expecting God to show up in the wind, the earthquake, and the fire, big, noisy displays of power. But God wasn't in any of those. He was in the still small voice. God's power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. If you're only listening for thunder, you'll miss His whisper. The whisper is strategic. It requires intimacy, closeness, quiet. God draws you into stillness so you can hear Him at the volume of relationship. When you learn to be still, you learn to discern. Not every opportunity is divine. Not every open door is yours. Not every voice is from heaven. Stillness filters out the counterfeit. It trains your spirit to recognize God's rhythm. Sometimes He'll stop the momentum in your life just to protect you from motion that's not meant for you. You think things are falling apart, but God is really keeping you from falling into something that could derail your destiny. His stillness is strategy. It's the pause before the pivot. Jesus understood this deeply. Throughout His ministry, He often withdrew to solitary places to pray. In moments when the crowds pressed in, when the demands increased, Jesus chose stillness. Before He selected the 12 disciples, He spent a night in quiet communion with the Father. Before He faced the cross, He went alone into Gethsemane. Why? Because strategy is born in stillness. The greatest moves of God are planned in silence. We often confuse stillness with inaction, but they're not the same. Stillness is obedience. It's saying, "God, I trust you enough to wait." It's refusing to rush what God is building. When you try to force progress outside of divine timing, you sabotage the process. You may think you're helping God, but impatience is the enemy of destiny. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is wait in stillness until God says move. Think about the story of Noah. After the flood, the waters didn't recede overnight. For months, Noah waited in that ark. No sound from heaven, no sign of change. It was still, it was quiet, and it was long. But in that stillness, God was resetting creation. He was forming new land, preparing a new world. When the time was right, God opened the door. The stillness was not wasted. It was working. When life slows down, when you feel suspended between what was and what will be, that's your strategic stillness. God is pulling you into divine recalibration. He's teaching you to stop fighting battles that don't belong to you, to stop chasing things He never called you to pursue. Stillness teaches surrender. It teaches you to release control and trust the unseen hand of God. Because while you're still, He's not. Heaven never sleeps. God is orchestrating details, connecting people, and shifting circumstances to fulfill His promise. Sometimes the stillness is for your protection. If you move too soon, you could step into something that's not ready. If you speak too quickly, you might reveal something that's still in development. God's strategy is timing, and timing is everything. The wrong move at the right time can destroy what God is building. So He keeps you still until the season is safe. That's not rejection, it's wisdom. In the stillness, God is also strengthening your spirit. He's teaching you to rest in His sovereignty. He's proving that your worth isn't in your work, your calling isn't in your business, and your anointing doesn't depend on applause. When you stop striving and start listening, you'll find that peace isn't the absence of problems. It's the presence of God, and that presence is loud enough to guide you even in silence. Eventually, the stillness breaks. The moment comes when God says, now. And when it does, you'll realize why He made you wait. You'll see that what looked like delay was actually direction. You'll understand that while you were learning to be still, God was putting everything in place. The people, the timing, the resources, all aligned. What once felt like a pause becomes the power that propels you forward. Stillness is the sound of strategy. It's heaven's way of saying, I'm working, even when you're waiting. It's not the end of motion. It's the refinement of purpose. So if you're in a quiet season, don't panic. Sit in it. Pray in it. Listen in it. Because the same God who parts seas and moves mountains is also the God who whispers strategy in silence. And when He finally speaks, you'll move with clarity, confidence, and divine precision. Because stillness prepared you for what sound alone never could. Your waiting season is training for your winning season. Nobody likes to wait. Waiting tests your patience, challenges your faith, and stretches your endurance. We live in a world addicted to speed. Instant messages, instant food, instant results. But God is not in a hurry. His clock doesn't tick to human time. He works by process, not pressure. When you belong to Him, every waiting season is a classroom, not a cage. It's not punishment, it's preparation. What feels like delay is really development. You are not being denied. You are being trained for what you've been praying for. When you're waiting, it feels like nothing's happening. You pray, you believe, you sow seeds of obedience, but the harvest seems distant. The silence can feel suffocating, and you start to wonder if God has forgotten your address. But the truth is, he hasn't forgotten you. He's forming you. The waiting season is where God builds the strength, wisdom, and resilience necessary for the weight of your next season. If he gave you the blessing before you were built to bear it, it would crush you. So he waits, not because you're not called, but because you're not yet ready. Think about David. When the prophet Samuel anointed him as king, David didn't step into the throne that day. He went back to tending sheep. He went back to obscurity. Years passed before he wore the crown, but during those years, God was training him. The fields taught him humility. The battles with lions and bears taught him courage. The caves taught him to depend on God. Every season of waiting was shaping him into the king he was destined to be. Had David rushed the process, he would have forfeited his preparation. But by enduring the wait, he gained the strength to win. Your waiting season is where God trains your heart before he trusts you with influence. It's where you learn to praise without applause, to pray without proof, to believe without evidence. Waiting teaches you to serve when no one is watching, to stay faithful when no one is clapping. God uses that season to teach you the rhythm of his timing. He wants you to understand that what's meant for you will not miss you, but it will mature you first. Waiting is not wasted when you understand its purpose. God is a master strategist. He uses time like a sculptor uses tools. Every delay is intentional. Every detour is directional. Every pause is purposeful. When God says, wait, he's saying, I'm working. He's moving pieces you can't see, setting up connections you don't know about, and preparing opportunities that haven't reached your calendar yet. Just because you don't see progress doesn't mean there's none. Seeds grow underground before they ever break the surface. Likewise, your destiny is germinating in the soil of waiting. Look at Joseph. He had dreams of greatness, visions of leadership and purpose. But before those dreams came true, he was betrayed, sold, and imprisoned. It looked like everything was moving backward, not forward. Yet God was using every setback as training ground. The pit taught him perspective. Potiphar's house taught him discipline. Prison taught him patience. By the time Joseph stood before Pharaoh, he wasn't just gifted, he was grounded. The waiting season made him ready for the winning season. You may be in a similar place. Maybe you've prayed for something, healing, a relationship, a breakthrough, and it hasn't come yet. You've watched others move ahead while you feel stuck. But don't mistake, not yet, for no. God's delay is not denial, it's design. He's not trying to withhold from you. He's trying to prepare you for the weight of what's coming. If he released it too soon, you might mishandle it. The blessing that comes before the building of character can become a burden. So God holds it until you're whole enough to hold it. Waiting seasons also test your motives. They reveal whether you want the promise or just the platform. They expose whether you're chasing purpose or chasing validation. In the stillness of delay, your heart is refined. You learn to love God for who he is, not just for what he gives. Waiting strips away the noise of ambition until only devotion remains. That's when you're ready for your winning season. When your heart is pure enough to handle success without losing your soul. It's easy to get discouraged in the wait. You may feel like life has left you behind, like everyone else is crossing the finish line while you're still stuck at the start. But what you don't see is that your training is happening in secret. Just as an athlete prepares in private before stepping into the arena, God is preparing you privately for a public victory. The discipline, patience, and faith you build now will sustain you when the spotlight comes. Isaiah 4:31 says, "They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength." Waiting isn't weakness, it's renewal. Every time you choose patience over panic, your strength is being restored. Every time you trust instead of trying to force it, your faith grows stronger. Waiting develops endurance, and endurance produces excellence. By the time your winning season arrives, you won't just have the blessing, you'll have the character to keep it. Remember, winning seasons don't start on the stage, they start in the shadows. God trains his champions in private. Moses spent 40 years in the desert before leading Israel. Jesus spent 30 years in silence before 3 years of ministry. Paul spent years in obscurity before preaching to nations. Every person God uses greatly has endured a season of waiting. The greater the calling, the longer the training. So don't rush what God is refining. Don't fight the process, because the process is your preparation. Your waiting season is not a waste. It's your workout. It's where you're learning to carry weight, to stand under pressure, to believe without evidence. It's where you're being conditioned for victory. When the time is right, when the lessons are learned and the character is formed, God will open the door you've been waiting for. And when it opens, you'll walk through it with confidence, not confusion. And when that winning season comes, you'll look back and realize that every delay was divine. Every disappointment was direction. Every unanswered prayer was protection. You'll see that the waiting wasn't holding you back. It was propelling you forward. The patience you learned will become peace in pressure. The endurance you gained will become power in purpose. So hold steady, keep believing, keep serving, keep growing, because what you call waiting, God calls training. And when your winning season arrives, you'll thank Him not just for the victory, but for the lessons, the faith, and the strength you gained while you waited. Your waiting season is training for your winning season. And when you finally step into it, you'll realize that the wait was worth it all. There comes a point in every believer's journey when the noise fades and heaven feels quiet. But I came to tell you today, quiet does not mean quit. Just because you can't hear Him doesn't mean He's not here. Just because you can't trace Him doesn't mean He's not at work. God is still moving. God is still speaking. God is still working, even in the silence. You see, silence is not absence, it's preparation. When God grows quiet, He's sharpening your spirit. He's refining your character. He's setting the foundation for what He's about to build. The silence is the soil where purpose takes root. And while you're wondering why nothing's happening, heaven is whispering, I'm getting you ready. Who God works best behind the curtain. He's the unseen architect, the master strategist, the silent conductor orchestrating a symphony you can't yet hear. You may not see Him shifting the pieces, but when the curtain lifts, you'll see how every pain had purpose, every delay had design, every setback was a setup. The hidden work of God is still the holy work of God. Faith must grow in the dark. You don't need faith when everything's clear. You need faith when it's confusing. You don't need faith when you can see the path. You need it when all you have is a promise. God will sometimes turn off the lights just to see if you'll keep walking, because real faith doesn't depend on sight. It depends on trust. And when your world goes dim, remember, that's where your faith learns to shine. Stillness is the sound of strategy. God doesn't always shout. Sometimes he whispers. He doesn't always push. Sometimes he pauses. The pause is not punishment. It's planning. The stillness is not empty. It's exact. When God holds you in place, it's because he's aligning the moment, the mission, and the miracle. The stillness is where you learn that God's timing is just as important as God's promise. And your waiting season, your waiting season, it's not wasted. It's training. God's delays are not denials. They're development. He's building something in you that the blessing will require of you. He's making sure your shoulders are strong enough to carry what you've been praying for. Don't rush the wait. Respect it. Because when the winning season comes, you'll realize the waiting season was worth it. So when God seems silent, don't give up. Grow up. When he hides his hand, trust his heart. When he closes doors, thank him for the protection. When he says, be still, resist the urge to move. Because the silence of God is not the absence of God. It's the evidence that he's still in control. Sometimes, the silence is not God's rejection. It's his redirection. He's turning your focus, stretching your faith, deepening your dependence. And when the time comes, when the clouds lift and the light breaks through, you'll look back on this season and say, now I see it. God was working all along. So hold on. Stay faithful. Keep praying even when it's quiet. Keep praising even when you don't feel it. Keep trusting even when you can't see it. Because your silence is sacred space. Heaven's workshop, the birthplace of miracles. And when the silence breaks, it won't just be a sound, it will be a shift. Somebody here needs to know, you are not forgotten. You are not forsaken. You are not finished. The same God who spoke worlds into existence can do more with your stillness than you can do with your striving. So wait well. Worship while you wait. Work while you wait. Because the silence of this season is not the end of your story. It's the setup for your victory. And when God finally speaks again, when he finally moves again, when he finally reveals what he's been building behind the scenes, you'll understand every quiet moment was divine preparation for your loud breakthrough. This is your season of silence, but it's not your season of stagnation. It's the season where God seems quiet, but is still working. And when the curtain lifts, when heaven opens, and the promise comes into view, you'll say what every faithful soul eventually learns to say. It was good that I waited, because while I was waiting, God was working.